My name is Saran Traore. I'm a certified executive coach. In this session, where it's really an opportunity for us to take in all that we've done the past couple of days and kind of anchor it around the concept of purpose. So that once you leave here today, it's beyond just putting all this information and putting it in a nice little box that you refer to if and when there is something jarring in your day, but it's more about the intentionality of what you're going to take out of here and linking it back to those core values and that purpose of why you do what you do as advocates. So, with that said, we always start with an icebreaker, or what I like to call an energizer. So again, just to make sure it's Friday, we've all had a great time here, learned a lot. So let's make sure that we have our mindset and our brains in an opportunity to really engage and learn together. So at your tables, and since it's quite intimate, we'll just kind of do this out. Tell me, if you could live in any country, real or imaginary? Again, we're going out of bounds here. Which would you choose? Yes, Amanda. Italy. Why? You like to eat. So the food. I love that. Yes. Could you please state your name as you? My name's Kirby. I live in Greece. Yes. I love to Italy, and I could go to all the spots that I want. And the food in Greece is also delicious. Also, the water and the beaches. I love it. Anyone thinking imaginary? Yes. Narnia. Why Narnia? I love it. Why? I love it. I love it. Okay. So we got to thinking about our worlds beyond the current. Let's now think about our intentional list. A lot of you guys will know that as your bucket list, but we're calling it our intentional list. Okay. Now, which item do you most want to check off this list in the next 6 months? Yeah, let's talk about timelines. Yes. You want to travel to Maine within the next 6 months. And if it's okay to ask, how are you going to ensure, what's the intentionality? How are you going to check in with yourself to make sure that you get this done in the next 6 months? I like that. Yeah. Self-accountability. You're a person that needs to see it. Anyone else? Yes, please. It's okay.
So I want to officially go out on my own. I work full time and I do consulting. My intention?
Yes. I'm going to clap for you. That is amazing. That is amazing. Now, may I ask, what's that actionable next step to ensure that something happens in the next 6 months?
I do work with a business coach, and so we put November 1st as the day, but the day where I will kind of formulate like a good strategy, because I do love what I do with my full-time job, and I would be lying if I said I didn't like to take like every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I know that there's value in what I offer as an advocate, and I know there's tremendous team. And I have 2 people that have started to work for me practically. So
amazing. Amazing. I see a lot of intentional points on that roadmap and a soft deadline, right? Because things could potentially change. But again, having that D-Day, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. So let's step into a bit around our objective for this session. Someone mentioned the rule of 3. Yes. Yes. I love the rule of 3. So you'll see that repeated theme. So as many of you signed up for this session today, we did talk about the concept of living your why. So we're going to spend some time revisiting. For some of you, it's quite clear. There's some idea of what it looks like. And for some of you, this is a starting journey. So again, today it's about a starting point that you are hopefully intentionally going to carry that through post today and the next 6 months and the next year and beyond. So we'll spend some time just really centering around why it's important to get a sense of your purpose, your why you do what you do. And it becomes a common language for others and how they connect with you as well. We'll also talk about recharging. It's not enough to only know what it is. You know it, you feel it, you can probably articulate it, but we all know that there are moments where we need that little battery to kind of light the fire and remind us. So we'll talk a little bit around the concept of recharging and why that too must be intentional. And of course, reward. We don't reward ourselves enough. We don't talk about what's going well and what keeps us going. So we'll talk about that aspect. And so these are the three objectives that we're looking to start today and tools that you can then continue. So just for you all, as you're taking notes, because you will be doing a bit of that, you'll be receiving a template as well that's going to help you guide through this and pull this through. And I have a soft deadline, a D-Day for you, that if not today, in the next 30 days, you have a sense of a why statement. Let's talk about the space we take and make. I always like to ensure that we have a sense of what we're doing here today. And so engagement is going to be key, whether that's reflection internally or sharing here. I want to make sure that we're curious and asking questions. Be open to new perspectives. It's not necessarily advice, but new information that's going to help shape your direction and what you want and need to do. And in order to do that, we need to have a safe psychological space. So please be respectful as folks are sharing and really being vulnerable around what this looks like. And by doing that, we are going to have fun. So that is a commitment that, can I get a confirmation? Perfect. Now, if I could just take the next 30 seconds or a minute to write a personal objective. You've seen the session objectives today. You've seen what we've talked about our verbal contract. If you have a personal objective in mind, and think beyond this session, as you're leaving this summit, what is a personal objective that you have that you're looking to ensure that you pull through? And you can kind of think on this. Writing is helpful because you can refer back to it at the end of the session to say, I think I have what I need. So I'll give you all a few minutes on that. Objective, goal, just something personal, taking into account what we're looking to accomplish here. If it's one of those, that's why I showed that, because it's to give you an idea. But if it's one of those objectives, that's great. If it's something beyond that, think on that as well. So, and again, as we're going through, you might tweak some of this. So none of this is like a contract signed in blood, by the way. So don't feel pressure that what you write right now is going to be what you have to adhere to, and that cannot change. Flexibility is important when we're talking about this. And so I love this quote by Eric Thomas. And he's basically, as it's very self-explanatory, when you find your why, the snooze button just doesn't exist anymore. Because those mental walls, you find a way. And so as shared earlier with D-Day, I'm sorry, what was your name? Yes. Becky. Becky talked about that November 1st D-Day. And I bet because she's very clear in articulating that why, she's going to make it happen. She's going to find ways, people, resources, because that snooze, that invisible snooze, for some reason doesn't exist because she's found her why, or as you all are doing when you're on the path of that clarity, the snooze button begins to disappear slowly and slowly because you'll find ways around that. So keep this in mind as we kick off. Welcome. Join a table where you can interact with others. So I just briefly wanted to share the concept of why purpose is important, especially for me. And I'm very service driven. It is important to me that I am a catalyst in supporting others in finding or solutioning. I don't have to be the subject matter expert, but I know that if I am in any way supporting others and finding that, that's what drives me. And I find that through my family, because I've realized that a lot of the tools and what I need, I've learned as I've matriculated through life. So family is a core value for me and something that I refer back to as I think about my purpose. And of course, growth, learning, and development. I'm perpetually curious, and sometimes I have to tone it down in order to get things done. And so here's my beautiful family. and some of them are in the audience today. My parents were from Guinea, West Africa. They're those of service. My dad in the government, my mom a teacher for most of her life, then into public service. My brother who's in the Air Force, my sister who's a pharmacist and really passionate about patient access. And so I realized that when I went back and leaned on some of the lessons. I'm a caregiver. My mother is battling cancer. My sister is a live organ donor, not a donor, recipient twice over. And to even be here, there was a time where we were not sure. Getting through that, I learned and I had the tools and those core values in that. Taking that into my professional life has helped me in accelerating in my career and finding those solutions to show my value, but to also find that meaning of why I do what I do. And so everyone's kind of seen this iceberg illustration of success. And so the parts that people don't see, the persistence, the dedication, and so forth, I'm better equipped to deal with that. And I believe you are too, when you let that opportunity from a mental capacity to pull on those past experiences to help you through whatever is probably draining your why or your purpose. So just to kind of anchor that aspect of how I leverage some of these processes and tools and just tweak it in the situation to find the solution I need, the motivation I need to accomplish the goal that I need. And so today, that's as much as we're going to talk about me. The rest of the time is how you are then going to leverage, just to give you a point of reference. So can anyone share with me what is their definition or in your own words of purpose? The why? Anyone else? What it means to you? Yes, Dana. I love that. Your contribution. Yes, Becky.
One better off than before we do.
Having an impact. Having an impact. I love that. So I wanted to share an actual definition from Oxford language. Reason, someone said, right? A reason for which something is done or created. I want to stress on that word, created, because we can mold and change, right? We're not confined for it to be what it is, or for which something exists. And as individuals, these are not just objects. As individuals, we can find some definition in this because whether we know it or not, we're looking for that reason for what we do, and especially the work that you all do as advocates. So it's very important that we look back to this structural definition of purpose and then again, create and mold and shape that for what it is for us as that anchor, because it will become that common language for how you interact with others or how you accomplish what you accomplish. So you've received templates. So as I mentioned before, yay to the team. So we're going to be using that as a guidance as you're filling this out and as we're going through the tools so that it's something you can leverage post our time together today. Anyone familiar with the golden circle? Raise your hands. My daughter is raising her hand because we talk about this a lot. Because it's such a tremendous tool. Simon Sinek as well? Yes? Okay. So I'm going to play a short video for you all.
Most people have no clue that in 2023 the best way to make money on Amazon is not with.
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet, they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded? And they didn't achieve powered man flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it. There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order.
And so beautifully and simply explained by Simon, it's that we spend a lot of time on the what. We tend to be very clear on the what. When you introduce, what do you do? It's our starting point whenever we introduce ourselves, and when others ask us what we do, it's where we start. Again, the how, we work in the healthcare system. A lot of the times, half of the people don't know the how, right? We solved it. It happened. The patient's on therapy. We'll go with it. And sometimes we'll create a process to make it easier next time. But the why, when we start there, think about it. When you're solving for something and you start with, let's say you're driven by the patient or the impact to the patient, how much faster is it resolved? And this can be either on the manufacturer side, where I've spent time when you're trying to get the brand teams to shift their focus and their entire marketing strategy. When you do start with the impact to the patient, and that's why we're doing what we do, all of a sudden the resources, everything shifts, and it's a lot more impactful than to the providers and then to the caregivers. And that the ripple effect is a lot more powerful. And so, again, this is not about pressure, because it can feel overwhelming and daunting. But the reality is, even if right now it's a start, it's a journey, and we're not really sure where that purpose sits or how we've formulated into a clear and simple message, your passions do exist. There are things, and that can be outside of work as well. Because once you discover that, you begin to see that you're stepping slowly, but sometimes even faster into that purpose. And it becomes a lot more clearer. The language, the verbiage, the articulation starts to be a lot more simpler because your feelings, your mind, everything is a lot more comfortable in the passion because you know it, it's familiar, it gets you happy. And so today, if it's not that the purpose is a lot clearer, we might just start with our passions. And so looking at your templates, we're now going to start the aspect of getting you all going. I have that 30-day on there. If it's not today, make that intentional list, not a bucket list, but that intentional list to begin to formulate what this looks like. And that's the tools that I'm imparting on you. So try to think about it even in all the sessions that you've gone through today. And so when we think, oh dear. All right, there we are. So as I've mentioned, when we think about revisiting or thinking about our whys or even our passions, there are things that have built our core values, whether it's through childhood, things that we've experienced are important to us, or things that we've experienced that we no longer want to pass on or want to experience. Our core values are starting from that point into young adulthood, where we are again changing and growing, getting to know ourselves, into who we are today could potentially change as well. But the concept being that our core values, if we think back to it and really anchor around it, there are repeated themes. So in that revisit, I want you to take a few minutes and just think about no more than 3. This is super hard. There are sessions that are run where we have people narrow their core value to one descriptive word. So we're getting into that space where if you had to demonstrate a behavior that is a core value, descriptive words are important because we were able to associate. So take a few minutes in that first section to think about up to 3 descriptive words that really articulate your core values. And again, it's not a test. I want to be helpful. Here are some examples of core values. You saw some of mine: service, family, growth. And I use those, they can flip, they can switch. This doesn't mean that other words don't exist or they're not as important. But again, rules of 3. We're human, our brains, they're computers, they need to categorize things. So it's to just help you focus a bit more. It's why I say no more than 3. This list is not exhaustive. Just pick 3 that best describe that core value, because when you know your core values and you can refer back to them, for example, you're working on a project and things start to shift a little bit, where maybe, let's say, integrity is a core value of yours. So when you think about your why and living that why and that purpose every day, something is happening in the dynamic that's looking to disrupt that. You're motivated, you find courage to speak up because you know that as a core value, integrity is important to you. Then that leads into ethics. It leads into doing things the right way. So when I coach leaders, we always start here. Be very clear about your core values, because believe me, they show up and they help guide you in those situations where you might think you're not sure where to begin your decision-making process. So when we're thinking about revisiting or beginning to formulate our why, a good starting point is figuring out what are your core values. Practice these with someone in your life to say, I want to articulate my core values and how they build my purpose and my why for what I do and why I do it. You'll find that it begins to be a little bit easier. And so for some of you, this might be clear. Someone asks you, what is your why? Why do you do what you do? Why are you in healthcare? Why are you an advocate? It's easy. But there are some days where maybe the battery is a little low. You're wondering, why am I still doing this, right? We're back to the question of why. So recharging is very important to your why, because sometimes it's that little motivation that you need to keep going. That little surge when you're tired, the processes are just a little too cumbersome. We have to figure out what are those items or those things that recharge us. So going back to What are you paid for? Someone mentioned about the universe. Was Dana, you mentioned something around the purpose from a universe perspective. It is okay to think about what the world needs. It doesn't mean you're going to solve it for the entire planet, but sometimes the world can be your community. It can be your family. It can be your friends, folks that are sometimes more of a support for you than even those that are supposed to be. Because once you figure that out, a way to recharge, and this is where the strategist and the implementation comes for me, it's if I know what my why is and what I'm looking to solve or what I'm paid for, what I'm good at, what are those challenges, I also need to know what's going to potentially derail me. It's not all about knowing your feel goods, folks. It's also knowing your triggers internally first, then external, because sometimes you are your own distraction. So from a recharge perspective, you've got to know what motivates you, and you also have to know what distracts you, what derails you. In the past, learn from it. Currently, find a way to mitigate it. What could? It won't even be in my way because now I know. So in that recharge, think about that. I wanted to really kind of articulate that concept. It isn't just about self-care is important, but part of self-care as well is knowing when you're heading into a potential cloud that's going to have that burnout set out faster. So I'll pause here. Does anyone want to share what they have so far? Whether that's in the revisit, let's start there. Anyone want to share some descriptive words around their core values? Yes, please state your name. Melinda, thank you. That's the way to do it.
Authenticity and courage.
Why are those important to you? We're back to the why question. Can you share a bit more details around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a professor and scholar and advocate. So being authentic to my students, my patients, anybody that I could work with, I was really secure about it. See, sometimes it's personal, but who I am in the classroom should match up with who I am outside. I don't want to wear different masks. And that's also really important for me as somebody who's neurodiverse. We hear so often of masking. And I didn't know that I was neurodiverse until about 3 years ago. So once I found that out, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I am who I am. I will adapt to my audience, but I want to be as authentic as possible.
Yeah.
What I do, what people on the way, those people, I have to have that empathy first and foremost.
Yeah. Yeah.
And doing that, the super courageous.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable. And I love that you mentioned adapting, correct? Because when I hear those comments about the faces, no one's asking, again, if you're clear on your core value. Anyone join my session last year on influential skills in healthcare? I know Bree was in my course. So last year I did a session on that, and it was very much so around that. Tailoring your communication to get the best and optimal outcome isn't wearing a face, isn't being inauthentic. It's about ensuring that I win, or that we win, or that this initiative moves forward. And I can do that. I can adapt while still being myself, because my communication style is going to be my communication style. But you have to understand me. Because you're different, I can't show up 100% all the time in how I receive information. Because if I need you to move forward in a decision and you don't communicate how, I have to adapt so you understand me. So thank you for adding that in. And so reward, another thing we don't do enough. So I have a sense of what my purpose or my core values look like. I have a sense of what recharges me or also what derails me. But then something's going very well. There are things I'm doing very well, and I'm not stopping to recognize that. When we don't do that, that's where those items that derail, they come through faster. because we're not rewarding ourselves. We're not giving that little happiness to keep going on what's working well. And so these are two questions that I always ask my leaders and my clients to do, is to just be very cognizant of what does energize me. And because when I know it, how do I get more of that? Dedicate more time to it. Create the space. You're very busy. So is it 5 minutes of reward that's realistic until I figure out ways to clear my plate enough to do more of it? Incremental steps and rewards are real. Don't wait for the big mushroom, because sometimes you'll burn out before you get there. Get those little wins where you can. So again, there's a section on your template to kind of just help you through that. And so more of a summary of some of those questions to ask yourself or to uncover your purpose. We just talked about it. Spend time knowing what your core values are. Revisit them, because sometimes you might want to add something, or you might discover something about yourself where you're like, at this stage of my life, this makes more sense. What am I passionate about? Now, what does the world need? What am I paid for? What am I good at? Because then ultimately, in order to create your golden circle, it's that when we begin to answer these questions, we can accept the fact that sometimes all of it may not be fulfilled in our professional setting. And if it's outside of the professional setting, where do I find that link to keep me motivated, to keep me going, to be healthy, so that I can show up for those in my life the way I want to show up? So these are great questions to revisit, because sometimes the insight is what you gain after you begin to answer these questions for yourself. It's not all about what others are answering for you. It's what you're answering for yourself, because a lot of the times we protect ourselves from answering these questions. And so in that template, again, I created a nice little box, not a big box, not a paragraph, not an essay. It's to try to simply think of the Apple example. Go back and watch the TED Talk if you need to. Because when we begin to simplify and communicate from the inside out, the what becomes easy. We can get to that. Your titles or whatever you enjoy, it becomes easy. But if we spend most of our time here where it's uncomfortable a little bit, but it's so worth it, the circle becomes a lot more clearer and robust. And as you engage with people, your impact shoots up tremendously, because they're drawn in. They don't even care about how they're going to do it or what you're going to do. I believe in what you're doing. I'm bought into it so much. We'll figure the rest out. This leads to so much influence. So in that little box, whether it's today, take some time to reflect as you're flying back home, or in the next 30 days, begin to write out different versions, right? Like when you're writing an essay for school, start out and then begin to trim it until it's a point where you're able to regurgitate this as easy as you saw in the example. And so as we kind of bring that to a close, I want to make sure that there's some time, some quiet time for you to think about this beyond the 45 minutes that we have together. If you came in Tuesday, if you came in Wednesday, or even yesterday, think back to everything that you've learned, the people that you've met. And in that, take a few minutes to, one, think about how to sustain. If I have a sense of my core values and what my purpose is, how do I sustain what's working well right now? It's working so well to keep me going, to discover this clarity. I want to keep doing this. This is what I want to keep doing, because it sustains the purpose. It sustains the why. I then want you to start, whether it's something you learn in this session from someone else as you're talking about, what's one thing that I want to start doing that's going to augment. Again, these are not siloed. They're meant to build upon each other. One new behavior, maybe. I want to build in 5 or 15 minutes of self-reflection in my day. It doesn't work in the evening because I'm so tired from work. I don't have time for the family. So maybe on my lunch break, I want 5 minutes dedicated to quiet. Something that I want to start doing. Be intentional about it. And be honest with yourself. What's the one thing you need to stop that's not supporting your purpose. We don't ask ourselves that enough, and we don't answer honestly enough sometimes. It's just you. There's no one in the conversation in your head, right? There's no one judging there. So you can be as honest as you need to be. But think about what's the one thing you want to stop. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of reflect on one of these three, or all of these three, but write it out. Don't just think about it, write it out. And so the reason I had you all sit a minute and think about it, it's because this is real. You're motivated. You had a few days of ideas. You're leaving here like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and change my institution, change my business model. I'm going to be crushing it. But if you're not building the habit, the demonstrated habit, with a clear idea of what it would look like if that motivation or that idea were to be put in place, we're going to be back here in a year and it's going to be looking for new ideas to solve for the same. And that is not a negative affirmation. That is to say that as you're motivated, as you find things that keep you going, you have got to build the habit, because on those days where it just feels like too much, you already kind of have an idea of what you need to get out of there. Think of your why and your purpose as your well. So when things are a little tough, I'm going to go back to those core value words. Did not say that this was important to me. This is what drives me. Okay. Because I have the habit of knowing what derails me. I have a habit of mitigating when those things come up. I've built the habit. So just some parting words around that to keep you accountable. Thank you all. That ends the session.